I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. And here we are, back with another episode, this time covering the Best Actor category. I will give my predictions as to who I think will get nominated, including a couple of possible contenders later on in the video. But if you're new to the series, welcome. This is our 10th season of Old's Oscar Countdown, of predicting the Oscars, where at the beginning of the series, we break down individual categories before the race starts to pick up a little bit, and I give predictions for some of the big award shows like Golden Globes or Critics' Choice or SAG, and we react to those and how they ultimately affect the Oscars, counting down in Old's Oscar Countdown fashion to the Oscars. But even though we cover some of those awards later on in the series, the beginning and every one of my videos at one point will cover every single one of the Oscar categories. So there will be a deep dive on even the smaller stuff like Best Visual Effects. We'll do 15-20 minutes on that. In the same way we have these dedicated long videos to some of the bigger categories to ultimately help you with your predictions. I like to give my opinions, my thoughts, my data, my research. But at the end of the day, this is just to help you make your own predictions, so feel free to comment down below. Let me know what you have in your own predictions. If you thought my arguments were good or bad, just want to kind of lay out the land as to where I think the race stands right now with over 9 years of Oscar predicting. Like I said, we're on our 10th season now of predicting the Oscars, so you can go back and check my reactions and thoughts and predictions of the Moonlight year and all that kind of good stuff. So we've been having a blast with this over the past 9 or so years, and I'm excited really to kick off this upcoming season. So without further ado, let's jump into my predictions for Best Actor, starting off with my first prediction, which is Timothée Chalamet for Marty Supreme. Just recently premiered a surprise screening at the New York Film Festival to really rave reviews. It was a home crowd in the sense of you have a New York director and actor. But it does seem that this is going to be a major Oscar contender. Now, I haven't seen the movie, so I can't comment on its quality in particular. But from the reactions and everything we've heard, it does seem to be an Oscar player, in particular Timothée Chalamet being kind of the main driving force behind that and the score really being kind of maybe some of the two standouts from the movie. Entertaining, engaging, long movie, but similar to something like maybe a Wolf of Wall Street or Catch Me If You Can, a really strong central lead performance, in this case by Chalamet, which has me confident enough to put him in my number one spot, just because when we talk about the lead acting performance, oftentimes we've seen, semi-leads or co-leads not do as well as true proper leads. When we think of Brendan Fraser in The Whale, for example, he's in every frame of that movie. He is the titular character. He is in so much of the movie. And particularly with some of these particular lead acting wins, it is almost always the true lead of the movie kind of getting in. Even just recently last year with Adrian Brody for The Brutalist, he's in every frame of that movie. And that's what the kind of lead performances that the Oscars like to reward. They also like to reward Timothée Chalamet. And I mentioned this on last week's Best Picture video, but Chalamet is in a kind of Leonardo DiCaprio kind of career path and career trajectory. And I want to kind of compare the two, particularly because I think they're both going to get nominated. But I was looking at some of the stats behind them, and in the same way Leonardo DiCaprio, his last 5 movies were nominated for Best Picture. Well, Timothée Chalamet is in a similar kind of a class, which is why I'm also confident, sight unseen, that he's going to get nominated for Best Lead Actor here, just because, first of all, he's been nominated twice already, but also in the 2020s, he's had 4 movies nominated for Best Picture. And then even before that, he's had some in the late 2010s. And what was interesting when we compared DiCaprio and Chalamet, I think it's an apt comparison. They're both, Chalamet is kind of the new DiCaprio, and that he's a young, exciting movie star that works with great directors and has great performances and continually kind of one-upping himself in the same way that young DiCaprio was as well. But what was interesting was DiCaprio for the longest time was the long overdue, when is he going to get his Oscar win? But I went back and I checked how many movies was Leonardo DiCaprio in before he won Best Actor that also were nominated for Best Picture. So how many Best Picture movies was Leonardo DiCaprio in before he eventually won Best Actor? His total was 7. Then on his 8th movie, he won for The Revenant. Funnily enough, I checked on Chalamet, how many movies has he been nominated, how many Best Picture movies was he also in? And I checked the numbers, and it was the exact same number. 7 movies he's been nominated for Best Picture. So if he gets nominated for Marty Supreme here, and Marty Supreme also gets nominated for Best Picture, he would kind of be on that 8th movie in the same way Leonardo DiCaprio had that similar trajectory. Now, DiCaprio had to wait a lot longer, and I think there was some young bias against DiCaprio, which may still exist for Chalamet. It is very rare for the Oscars to reward, particularly in the male acting categories, really young actors. That being said, Chalamet has almost expedited his career in just how many Best Picture movies he's been in, how he's already been nominated twice, almost nominated 3 times, almost won last year. So who's not to say that this is kind of going to be the final coming out party for him. So I haven't seen the movie, but you have some of those stats. You have the fact that it could get nominated for Best Picture. It could be a real contender. You have a true lead performance that everyone talks about being a really great performance and the central performance of the movie. So people like the movie, they'll very likely as well like Chalamet. He's a well-liked past nominated actor. Everything seems to kind of be lining up for this to be really Timothée Chalamet's official crowning as the kind of young king of Hollywood, give him the Best Actor prize, and really say the future of Hollywood is on him, because I think a lot of people, and a lot of us that have been watching movies, have seen him as the kind of next heir apparent for a long time, and I'm really excited to see what he does next. Then my second prediction, I'm going to go with Jeremy Allen White from Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere. And this is a big drop-off, admittedly, from number 1 to number 2. I really do think that this is an exciting Best Actor year, because in past years, we've had like a very clear 4, and then the 5th spot could either go to one person or another person. But it was kind of boring for the past 2 years, I think. It's been pretty standard in terms of who's going to get nominated. This year, I feel differently. I do think that there are 7, 8, 9 performances that are all in contention, that could all kind of swap each other out, and I'm not confident really in any of them. And even though I have someone like a Jeremy Allen White in my number 2 slot, he could absolutely miss come Oscars. But based on how I'm seeing the race now, right now, and I want to be consistent with my video last week where I had Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, nominated for Best Picture. If it's nominated for Best Picture, Jeremy Allen White has a very good shot at getting nominated. So first off, I mentioned this last week, but the Academy loves biopics. Particularly, they love nominating biopics for Best Picture. 7 out of the last 10 years, there's been at least one true biopic nominated, and many years we've had multiple in a row. In particular, when we talk about music biopics, we've had 3 years in a row with Elvis, Maestro, and last year's A Complete Unknown getting nominated for Best Picture, getting a lot of nominations, and in particular acting nominations. And what was interesting was I went back just over the last 8 years, and I wanted to see, okay, if a biopic gets nominated for Best Picture, what's the acting corollary? How many acting nominations do they get? And in particular, that kind of lead actor, what do they do in terms of wins, in terms of nominations? How does that kind of turn out? And what I found was really interesting. What I found, if you just go year by year, is that the lead actor of a biopic that gets nominated for Best Picture almost always either wins or almost wins, which is a huge sign of support for Jeremy Allen White. I mean, just go through it. 2017, Darkest Hour, nominated for Best Picture. Gary Oldman wins. 2018, Bohemian Rhapsody, Rami Malek wins Best Actor, this category. 2019, there was nothing. 2020, Daniel Kaluuya wins for Judas and the Black Messiah, which also got nominated for Best Picture. What's next? 2021, you have King Richard gets nominated for Best Picture. Will Smith, once again, wins. Then you have 2022, Austin Butler for Elvis, almost wins, doesn't win the BAFTA, but it was really close going into Oscars night. 2023, you had Oppenheimer, Cillian Murphy wins. And then last year, you had A Complete Unknown and Timothée Chalamet also almost wins. So you either win the category or almost win the category, or in the 1 year of 2019 where there wasn't a true biopic, no one is really nominated. So if I kind of believe that Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere is going to get nominated for Best Picture, then who's to say Jeremy Allen White is not a strong contender? Not only have we seen them really appreciate music biopics, they've also just appreciated generally biopics, actors playing famous people, other actors. Last year, I was bullish on Kieran Culkin getting nominated and potentially even winning in my very first video. And he eventually did that. And he was another TV actor who had great success in Succession and won all these awards and knew how to win awards on the Emmy side of things and just repeats on the same side on the Oscars, on the movie side of things. Who's to say the same thing won't happen here with Jeremy Allen White, who just won a bunch of awards on the Emmy side for The Bear and knows how to campaign and how to kind of play the circuit. Who's to say he's not going to be able to come on the Oscar side of things? And what I think is also an underrated part in terms of the campaigning side of things, not necessarily just judging the performance for what it is, the campaigning side of things, is that people don't totally, I think, have appreciated the fact that Bruce Springsteen is still alive, that he was intimately involved with the making of this movie, and that he likes the movie, and that he'll be around to promote the movie. You know, when we think about past biopic nominees, whether it be Bob Dylan or Freddie Mercury, Chalamet and Rami Malek didn't have the benefit of, campaigning with them. Even though Bob Dylan's alive, he's kind of, mysterious and wouldn't kind of do that stuff. Springsteen, what a huge factor would that be if he goes to a party with Jeremy Allen White and goes, this guy's the real deal. This guy played me better than I thought. This is a true, real story. That's going to wow people. That's going to surprise members of the Academy. That's going to be a huge sign of support if he kind of does campaign with him. And we know that the Oscars, even in the great year of 2025, even though the Academy's gone a lot bigger, campaigning, meeting people, going to parties, that's still an important part of getting nominations. And the only kind of parallel that we've had that's been similar to that would be Elton John campaigning with Taron Egerton for Rocketman. And that got him a SAG nomination and a BAFTA nomination. Now, he ultimately did miss out at the Oscars, but Rocketman was also a movie released in May, more of a blockbuster play, a little bit more general, more of a populist movie. Whereas this is a fall film festival movie meant to be kind of more of a prestige focus, and will have that kind of top of mind awareness right before voting season, whereas Rocketman was, an earlier release and was struggling against that. So I think if Bruce Springsteen really comes along with him, the kind of archetype of this type of performance at the Oscars either wins in this category or almost gets nominated, or almost wins, it is, I think, a real strong kind of corollary here. Now, there's a real possibility, like I mentioned, that Springsteen doesn't get nominated for Best Picture. It gets even more muted reviews once the movie comes out, and he kind of just fizzles away. But if this is a real kind of priority for 20th Century Studios, and Disney in general, because Fox Searchlight doesn't have a movie as well, I think they're going to really push this movie from the Disney side of things. So who's to say that this isn't going to be a top priority, and who's to say Jeremy Allen White won't be in contention here, even with the potential, I think, a Golden Globe nomination and a win. There's a possibility and a path there that could be really important for him. So I still think Jeremy Allen White has a real strong chance to get nominated, and why I have him in my number 2 slot. Then in my number 3 slot, I have Leonardo DiCaprio for One Battle After Another. I know that this is some people's number 1, and I understand that, but I'm kind of half in, half out, and ultimately wanted to be kind of cautious and reserved in my approach. Now, I still have him in my predictions here, and I'll tell you why. First off, Leonardo DiCaprio, we mentioned last week, 5 Best Picture nominated movies in a row, 7 out of his last 9, and most of the time when he gets nominated for Best Picture, he also gets a Best Actor nomination. He's a beloved member of the Academy. He's won before, nominated many times, nominated recently, frequently in movies that they really like, so you would think they like him too as well. He's funny, he's emotional. I think this is a great character of his. I think you'll see a lot of Halloween costumes of his character this past year, and I think he's got a really strong Best Picture contender, not only of a nomination, but potentially even a win. And that means maybe DiCaprio comes along with that movie in the same way that Mikey Madison came along with Anora and that win last year, where it was like, it's winning director, it's winning picture. Is Mikey Madison going to come along? She ultimately did. And if it becomes clear that Paul Thomas Anderson is going to win for One Battle in terms of picture, director, maybe DiCaprio comes along with it as well. But I'll also tell you why I'm a little bit more concerned and have him in my number 3 spot and why he's not a slam dunk. And that is just to say that DiCaprio, in his post-Oscar career, has been taking a back seat. He hasn't really been trying to get the Oscar. He's got it. He feels kind of secure and confident that he doesn't need to get nominated. He is already a legendary actor. He doesn't kind of need these accolades, so he's not going to do the extra work to get nominated all the time. And we've seen this. Last year, Killers of the Flower Moon, or I guess it was a couple years ago, Killers of the Flower Moon gets nominated for Best Picture. It actually gets 10 nominations. DiCaprio doesn't get nominated, even though he was, in a lot of the precursors. Same thing with a couple years before that, where you had Don't Look Up. Don't Look Up, nominated for Best Picture. 4 actual Oscar nominations. DiCaprio doesn't get nominated. Even in 2019, with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he did get nominated, but he was taking a back seat to Brad Pitt. That was the Brad Pitt year. So because I don't think DiCaprio wants to get into his personal life and doesn't want to kind of reveal stuff like that, he's not going to be doing a lot of press. He's not going to be doing a lot of interviews. He's not necessarily going to be doing a lot of Q&As. Now, he actually has been doing a lot of that for One Battle After Another, but I think that was more so to try to because it was an expensive movie and he wanted people to go see it, and he wanted Thomas Anderson to get a big hit on his hands, and that didn't entirely work out. But that being said, he did do a lot of press for that. I just don't know if he's going to do a lot of press in terms of the Academy campaigning and going to those parties, because he doesn't need to. I don't know if that's kind of his desire. And I also have some concerns that he's not, necessarily the true lead of the movie. There are stretches of the movie where he's not in it in every single frame. That being said, I think the movie is going to be so well liked. I think it's going to be a really strong Oscar contender. He's a well liked actor himself, and he's funny and he's likable and enjoyable in the same way maybe his past couple characters were not, and charming as well. So I do think ultimately that will be enough to get him a nomination. But I'm a little bit more conservative, where it's like, yes, he could go along, but I don't see this as a strong, clear, for sure, definitely going to win performance. It's like, I think he's going to coast along the fact that this movie is going to be really well liked. But he's had a couple of movies now where he's been in really well-liked movies, and he wasn't able to coast to a nomination. So keep that in mind as well. Be a little bit cautious maybe with DiCaprio. It's not necessarily a guarantee. In the same way Don't Look Up wasn't a guarantee. In the same way Killers of the Flower Moon wasn't a guarantee. Even though maybe at one point in the season we thought they were guarantees. Just want to be a little bit more cautious this time around. Then my fourth prediction, I had Wagner Moura for The Secret Agent. I had the pleasure of seeing this film at TIFF this past year to a really raucous crowd. They really kind of enjoyed the film. And I ultimately included him here because this is a true lead performance in a long movie. I think it's a very stoic performance. It's not traditional in the sense of he has these big crying scenes or big emotional scenes, but it's a great reaction shot movie. It's a great kind of stoic, calm, reserved. He's very charming as well, as he kind of just floats through these different settings within Brazil's kind of authoritarian period and military dictatorship there in the 70s and 80s. And ultimately, in the same way, I'm over-indexing in international movies on my Best Picture nominations video last week. I also want to over-index in my Best Actor video, which is also why I have Wagner Moura here. As a matter of fact, I see this movie very similarly to the Brazilian movie I'm Still Here last year, which of course surprised and got not only a Best Actress nomination, but also a Best Picture nomination. And that may be the same thing that happens this year as well. People kind of doubt it and then it surprises once again, but I didn't want to doubt it, at least in the Best Actor category here, because they're very similar in that they have movies from great Brazilian directors. They have two excellent lead performances at the center, in the case of Wagner Moura here or Fernando Torres last year. They're about this time period within Brazil, this kind of authoritarian period that they're experiencing. So not only can particularly Brazilian members of the Academy think that it's a good movie, but they can also feel that it's an important movie, an important story to tell, a political movie, so there's extra added kind of emotional feelings associated with that they can maybe really rally behind for this film. And then Wagner Moura himself, has worked on a lot of American TV shows. He's been in American movies, like he was in The Gray Man, and he was in, most recently, Civil War, so he has some kind of Hollywood connections, so he's not this kind of unknown actor. That being said, the reason why it's in my number 4 slot, and I'm still a little bit cautious in that getting nominated, is because there is no history really with non-Best Picture nominated actors from foreign films getting nominated in this category. It is pretty much something that never happens. In the Best Actress side of things, you see a little bit more, foreign actors who are not in English language movies get nominated, particularly recently. If you think of, Emilia Perez last year, if you count that, for Carlos Sofia Gascon, or even some more obvious examples like Sandra Hüller for Anatomy of a Fall. But on the actors side of things, I actually went back and checked, and there's occasional, instances where you have performances in this main category, like Antonio Banderas for Pain and Glory, which was mostly in Spanish or entirely in Spanish. And then you have to go all the way back 30 years before that to 1990 for Gerard Depardieu for Cyrano de Bergerac. But in those cases, those were kind of big movie stars. I mean, Antonio Banderas getting nominated in 2019, he had been in many English language Hollywood movies throughout the 2000s. He was a well-known commodity, versus Wagner Moura is still more of a newer actor to American audiences. In the same way, Gerard Depardieu in the 90s, he was a big movie star. He was in Green Card in that same year with directed by Peter Weir, like a mainstream romantic comedy. So he was a big movie star at the time as well. But it's just rare, frankly, to have in this category, Best Actor, Best Picture nominated movies of foreign actors getting nominated. Even in Best Picture nominated movies, the foreign actors very rarely get nominated. It's just a kind of a hurdle that we've seen in history's past. And then the supporting actor category, forget about it. I couldn't even find a single instance where that happened. It's like technically maybe Benicio del Toro in Traffic, but that's an American director, an American movie, or most of the movies in English, just not necessarily his parts. So it really is kind of a rare thing to happen. Then, that being said, I'm still predicting it to happen because I think this is the new Academy. I think that the international members of the Academy will start to more show their reflection of their preferences in the same way we've seen that on the Best Actress side, or Best Supporting Actress side. Who's to say we're not going to also see that here on the Best Actor side of things? So I didn't want that to kind of stop me past history because we know the Academy's changed so recently. That being said, I think we should still keep that in mind. We've never had, I think, really any performances, or pretty rare performances, of people in non-speaking, non-English language films get nominated for acting when those non-English language films were not nominated for Best Picture. And then B, just in the male acting categories in general, we've had very few international actors who are speaking in non-English language get nominated in this category. It's just very rare. But I still have Wagner Moura because I believe in the movie, the strength of the movie. I think it'll be well acclaimed critically. I think he gives a terrific performance in the central role. It's also not showy, though, so it has a little bit of concern there. So ultimately, that's why it kind of lands here in my number 4 slot, where I'm trying to over-index on international films, but I'm also not guaranteeing this as a nomination. Then in my 5th slot, I went with Jesse Plemmons for Bugonia. And this one, I don't have a statistical argument. This doesn't necessarily even make sense on paper, but based on doing this for 10 years now, this just feels like a performance that will get nominated at the Oscars and nowhere else. Jesse Plemons feels like the perfect actor who is your actor's favorite actor, who been in a lot of great movies, oftentimes in like these character actor parts, and is now starting to be in more lead performances. I in many years thought of him similarly as the modern day Philip Seymour Hoffman. Coincidentally, they played father and son in 2012's The Master, and he's really had a similar career path, I think. And he'll show up in one scene for Civil War and totally be the best scene in the movie. But then he'll also now start to do these kind of main lead performances, like A Kind of Kindness last year, or now with Bugonia here. So I think that, in particular, the Academy's branch of the actors, which is smaller than the BAFTA or even SAG, they'll appreciate this actor and what he kind of represents, the kind of character actor turned main actor, well respected, been in a lot of great movies. Like I said, your favorite actor's favorite actor. And then I also think about things of why I don't think he's probably going to get nominated for BAFTA or SAG. There's less of a possibility there, just because SAG is a much bigger group of actors, a lot of not frequently working actors, or even radio hosts. So I don't think the movie's going to be super well seen by the time SAG happens, and therefore he won't get nominated. And in the same way, BAFTA, I'm not confident he's going to get nominated there, because they may like the flashiness of the kind of Hollywood actor being a little bit more intimate. In the case of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson for The Smashing Machine, or George Clooney for Jay Kelly, I feel like they're going to appreciate more of those performances. And the Academy does this every now and again too. So I don't know if I'm going to have the guts to ultimately, after no precursors, predict Jesse Plemons there for Bugonia. But it is the type of movie that the Oscars appreciate. The kind of prestige-focused, almost all of his movies, in terms of Jesse Plemons, he doesn't do a lot of mainstream movies, does mostly prestige. That's the kind of way I think the Academy wants to view itself. I think he's a very well-respected actor. And then even just in the pure number sense, if you want to give a numbers argument, Yorgos Lanthimos, he's released his last 3 movies have gotten 5 acting nominations. So if we think Emma Stone's going to get nominated for Best Actress, who's to say Jesse Plemons won't get here for Best Lead Actor? And I haven't seen the movie myself, but based on reports, it does seem that it's not a big ensemble-based movie. It really is kind of a two-hander between Jesse Plemons and Emma Stone, a little bit more of a smaller movie in that sense. So he has a lot of opportunity and a lot of scenes to really show off his talent. So I do think that it will eventually be revealed to be a little bit more of a showy part once people have seen it. I've seen the original that the movie's based off of, so I can only imagine kind of the depths that Plemmons will eventually go into, and excited to see that. And I think he's a very well-respected actor. I'm actually nervous that the movie isn't super well respected in terms of maybe getting a bunch of nominations at other places, but it does seem like an Academy type of a movie, which is why I included it in my Best Picture predictions, and once again wanted to be consistent. If I think the movie's going to get nominated for Best Picture, well, it's going to have a couple of other nominations too, right? In this case, I went with Jesse Plemons for Best Actor. Now talking about some of my possible contenders that could get nominated. The first one being George Clooney for J. Kelly. And this was a movie that I ultimately felt a little bit of regret about not including in last week's video of potential Best Picture contenders. Because I may look like a fool and it could maybe obviously get nominated for Best Picture, and it's the clear one for Netflix. I'm just really unsure if that's really the one they're going to be supporting. And I do think it's telling ultimately why I don't have Clooney in my nominations here. I think it's telling the response of the Venice audience to the movie versus the Telluride response to the movie, and a mostly American audience versus a mostly international audience. And the international audience didn't really like the movie, and the Telluride audience loved the movie. And I think 10 years ago, when the Academy was mostly American, this would be a slam dunk of a nomination, appeals directly to their tastes, movie star, being a little bit more intimate, reflecting back on his career, meta aspect, just perfectly aligned to the Academy's tastes and their personal experiences. Whereas the international members of the Academy don't have as much of that connection of like the idealism of an American movie star necessarily, particularly, not like the Brits do a little bit. They kind of appreciate that, but the other members of the Academy that are more international, or South America or other parts of Europe, they haven't necessarily appreciated or have that same emotional connection that an American audience would have. So I haven't seen the movie yet. I think once I see the movie, I'll have a better understanding as to its potential nomination of a Best Picture or Best Actor. But because I didn't have it in for Best Picture, I didn't want to include it in for Best Actor. I'm kind of a little bit more down on the movie. And once again, because I think it had that poor international response, I wonder if this movie is going to really resonate and if it doesn't have the international branch of the Academy, it has to be beloved by the American branch of the Academy. And then I think about stuff like campaigning and getting yourself out there. And as George Clooney, if he doesn't think he's going to get a win for this, why is he going to nominate or campaign at all? Just to barely get a nomination? He's a very rich man who doesn't need to spend time campaigning and going to parties. He's already got an Oscar. He's kind of in this position of power where if it starts to become clear that he's definitely not going to win and he may not even get nominated, will he put in that extra effort to eventually get that nomination? I'm not entirely sure in this case. I don't think there's going to be that motivation the same way there's not with DiCaprio, except in this case here, J. Kelly's a much weaker film in terms of overall nominations, in terms of Best Picture, and in terms of Best Director. I think if you think it gets in for Picture, you also have it in for Screenplay and a couple of acting nominations. Right now I have it in for Screenplay and then maybe one acting nomination, which we'll talk about maybe in a couple of weeks, but I'm a little bit dubious. Interested to see once I see the film myself, I'll be able to kind of understand a little bit more. But right now, because I haven't seen the movie, because I think it had a poor response at Venice and that international group of the Academy didn't like it, I am nervous that it won't have the overall support to get nominated. And then my other possible contender is Michael B. Jordan for Sinners. I think a lot of people have him locked and loaded in their nominations. So I think people may be surprised that he's a possible contender, and I also debated not even including him in this video, but wanted to talk about this type of performance and his paths, because he does have a lot of numbers and stats behind him. So that's kind of the pro side of things. Why he could get nominated was he was an odd one, but he's being rewarded as Best Outstanding Performer at the Santa Barbara Film Festival. And I think it was not since 2008 where Angelina Jolie won that award. Pretty much every single year, the winner of that award has gone on to get nominated for an acting prize. So pretty great streak there from 2009 until 2024. Every single one of those winners have got nominated. So the strong side support there for Michael B. Jordan. The movie I expect to be well nominated and appreciated. He's playing two different roles, so there is some showiness to the performance and the role itself. And then I also think he has a strong path of potentially winning Best Actor Drama at the Golden Globes, because you have, I think Marty Supreme is probably going to be in the comedy category in the same way I think One Battle After Another will probably be in the comedy category as well. So you have two main competitors in DiCaprio and Chalamet in another category. So if he gets nominated and wins and shows up on stage with the Golden Globes, just ask Sebastian Stan last year, winning does actually matter in terms of getting your name out there and saying you're a real great actor and you can give a really great speech and can convince the Academy to, I guess he's a contender now, and kind of follow the herd and give you a nomination. That being said, the con side of things is that the Golden Globe path isn't totally clear. Who's to say they won't go with Jeremy Allen White if that movie is categorized as a drama, because they like those types of music biopics as well? Or who's to say that they won't go for Wagner Moura in the same way they went with Fernando Torres, an international group, the Golden Globes are, and they may want to appreciate another international performance. So it's not clear as well. And then ultimately, my big con, the big reason why I didn't have him in this category is because these type of performances don't really get nominated. Michael B. Jordan is a movie star, and movie star performances, even in well-liked Best Picture movies, rarely get nominated. You know, I'm not talking about the quality of the performance or whether he should or should not. I'm just talking about the types of performance, which it is. And Sinners is a blockbuster released earlier in the year. Earlier, not fall releases for movie stars in blockbusters in the years past. Top Gun Maverick, Tom Cruise didn't get nominated. Margot Robbie for Barbie didn't get nominated. Timothée Chalamet for the Dune movies hasn't gotten nominated. These types of performances, these movie star, stoic kind of type performances, or you're at the central of the movie of a blockbuster, they're just not appreciated in the same way as a character actor going with an intimate portrayal in a fall film festival. They're just not. I mean, we've seen this time and time again, and that's what I think Michael B. Jordan is. I don't think the Academy sees him as like an exciting young up-and-comer, because he's already been in 3 Creed movies, and he was in Black Panther, and he was in Fruitvale Station. This is not going to be similar to something like a Daniel Kaluuya for Get Out nomination, where that was like a surprise. Who is this guy? Never seen him before, give him the nomination. Or even Mikey Madison for Anora. He's not in that category. I think he's more in line with a Tom Cruise and Top Gun Maverick. And even though Sinners was a huge deal, and even though Sinners will get a bunch of nominations, in the same way Barbie got a bunch of nominations, in the same way Dune 2, or in the same way Top Gun Maverick, these are all phenomenons. These are all Best Picture nominated movies. These are all movies that got nominated a bunch of places, and their leads, their movie star leads, did not get nominated for Best Acting categories. So who am I to say now that this type of performance will get respected by the Oscars when all the other ones weren't? That's my concern. He's still a possible contender. He has a showy role in a movie that's very well liked. Maybe they see it more as an ensemble. Maybe they forget the acting performances and see it more of a technical feat. That's kind of my feeling. That's the kind of slot I've lumped it into right now. But he has a path. He gets the win at Golden Globes. He gets nominated at SAG, I think. And then there's a real path for him for a nomination. But this type of performance doesn't always get nominated, which is why I'm being a little bit more conservative and leaving him out of my nominations. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. I'd love to hear your Best Actor predictions and your thoughts on what I've got so far. But that's about it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss next week's video on Best Actress. And yeah, until then, stay tuned.